was a television studies course, and I got to write about my favourite TV show, Arrested Development. So obviously this was my favourite class, just writing about funny TV shows. So I'll read you one of the essays that I wrote. So obviously this won't be terribly interesting for most of you to listen to. So just feel free to use this as a way to get to sleep. I won't be offended if you fall asleep. The narrative structure of a television program features many unique concepts to aid in character and story development. Arrested Development, created by Mitch Horowitz, is a television program that uses many concepts in a way not typically seen in traditional situation comedies. The series form allows for the show to introduce and conclude stories within an episode with its character-driven narrative to build the stories. The stories are constructed around a problematic that allows multiple storylines to interweave together upon a conflict that will arise at the beginning of each episode. Characters will explore the conflict and come full circle back to resolving the issues and back to how they started. But in most cases, better off for analysing and overcoming given obstacles. A sitcom like Arrested Development is capable of exploring the diegetic and non-diegetic realms in unison that facilitates and enables the viewer to know the entire world that the characters are involved with. Concepts such as voiceover narration and analepsis help to develop the narrative of the show when time for an episode is constrained and valuable. Arrested Development is an American situation comedy, also known as sitcom, series following the lives of the dysfunctional Bluth family. Once a wealthy family who lost everything after the father gets sent to prison. The show was created by Mitch Horowitz for the Fox Broadcasting Company, running for 3 seasons between 2003 and 2006. It utilizes a handheld single camera setup, and each episode is 22 minutes in duration, fitting into a half-hour time slot with commercial breaks. Along with Horowitz, Ron Howard is an executive producer who also serves as the uncredited narrator of the show, helping to tie together important plot points of the fast-paced and intricate narrative that Arrested Development is unique for. This essay will focus on the pilot episode, Season 1 of Arrested Development, with the introduction of the core characters and main storyline that serves as the basis for the majority of the series. Despite the overarching narrative, the show is highly typical of a sitcom with multiple and interweaving storylines that see a resolution and the conclusion of each episode. The show was produced for the Fox Broadcasting Company for all 3 seasons, who pulled it off the air February 2006 due to insufficient ratings. Arrested Development was designed for a valuable niche audience due to the era of plentiful television programming, rather than for a broad-based audience that is already overwhelmed with choice of regular programming. The show intended to set itself apart from regular sitcoms to attract a dedicated audience. Such examples as excluding the use of a laugh track to keep the narrative flow consistent and uninterrupted, cutting to flashbacks and archival footage from the present time to aid in understanding of the story and plot. Despite the low ratings, Arrested Development created a cult following and devoted fan base, earning itself 6 Emmy Awards and 1 Golden Globe. The show still currently returns Arrested Development can be described as a serialized series, but for the most part, the show most closely exemplifies the series narrative form. A television series utilizes an episodic narrative structure to tell the story in which each episode is self-contained, standing on its own within the television series. An episode will focus on a set of issues that get resolved by the time the show ends, and so the cycle continues for nearly each episode, unlike the serial that does not require the conclusion of a story each time the show ends. Ellis terms the concept of the problematic a situation with the potential for perpetual conflict. This can be the conflict that runs throughout an entire series, and what characterizes it to how the story takes shape, and how the characters interact with each other in the story. The series employs storylines that don't require the problematic to constantly be the central conflict, rather broken up into episodic structures resolved at the conclusion of the program. Fundamentally, the series implies the form of the dilemma rather than that of resolution and closure. This means that each episode will begin with a new situation that the characters explore, while the problematic that the show may be centered around is what motivates them to resolve the conflict or problem addressed at the beginning. Dunleavy also explains this idea of a new or occasional viewer accessibility to a series. While they cannot necessarily read the nuances of story arcs, which can refer to episodes deep in the narrative past, occasional or new viewers can sample the series through its resolving stories. The series, with its episodic narrative, allows for viewers to be able to jump right into the plot of the stories without much prior knowledge of the show, allowing them to have a decent understanding of the show through one episode. Arrested Development has a slightly altered approach to its series to that of a more traditional sitcom. The show incorporates a problematic that is set up in the pilot episode of Season 1, when George Bluth Sr. is arrested and sent to prison for defrauding the Bluth Company. For the rest of the season, the show centers around getting him out of prison, and in later seasons keeping him away from going back to prison. Then there is the issue of new viewers not understanding the program concept and premise of the story if they wanted to start watching partway through the series. Arrested Development overcomes this by starting each new episode with the opening credits, with the narrator providing a narrative summary of the premise. Now the story of a wealthy family who lost everything, and the one son who had no choice but to keep them all together. It's Arrested Development. This quickly summarizes that the show involves a story of a dysfunctional family, a lead protagonist, the son, and a whole lot of conflict between them. The credits provide quick and effective relief for any viewers who are unfamiliar with the show and can begin to watch with a basic knowledge and understanding of how Arrested Development works. It also excludes the use of a cold open found in most sitcoms, as it would not serve any purpose to those that are unfamiliar with it. The episodes then develop around multiple and interweaving storylines between the core characters in each episode that are resolved or partially resolved at the conclusion. What the pilot episode of Arrested Development does is it sets up George Bluth's overarching story, then introduces the core characters with their own multiple storylines that eventually interweave together, such as Michael and his son George Michael and their attempt to move to Arizona, Tobias and Lindsay's rocky relationship, Job's inability to please the family with his magic illusions, and even Buster's Eat Ball-like relationship with Lucille. The pilot acts as an induction into the lives of the Bluths, showing each character's underlying intentions that help to make up the narrative for each episode. a state of equilibrium at the beginning, then some form of disruption of the equilibrium occurs, the disequilibrium, and finally the reinstallment of the equilibrium. Stories in a television series are frequently character-driven to build up the narrative, as Kozlov emphasizes that they must be enacted by a given set of characters or actants in a certain setting. Together, events and existence are the basic components out of which stories are made. Similarly, Jostein Grubsrud highlights that the central element in a narrative is that a subject has a project, i.e. a wish or desire for something. We can see this through the core characters in the narrative, how they always have a motive or goal that they adhere to for the entirety of the episode, thus creating the stories for the show. They are realised through a conflict where the subject has both helpers and opponents. The character-driven narrative of a show centres around the equilibrium being disrupted and resolved in order for the episode and characters to progress. The many storylines in the pilot episode of Arrested Development are structured around the equilibriums by the core characters and help their storylines interweave for greater meaning in the conclusion. Most notably, the story of Michael begins with the equilibrium of him waiting for his father to make him in charge of the Bluth Company. Ron Howard, the narrator, introduces Michael to the viewers by stating, "This is Michael Bluth. For 10 years he's worked for his father's company, waiting to be made a partner. And right now he's happy." This is disrupted as the disequilibrium when George appoints his wife Lucille in charge and tells Michael it was not the right time for him. Further disequilibrium follows when Lucille appoints Buster in charge, prompting Michael to leave with his son and look for work in Arizona. There is recognition of this disruption when the rest of the family realize they need Michael to come back and run the company as an attempt to repair the disruption. The equilibrium is reinstated when Michael realizes that family is the most important thing and comes back to run the company. However, this time round, the equilibrium is more enhanced than the first one with Michael's known hard-working capability and family-backed assurance of being able to do the job. There are many other multiple storylines in the episode that aid in the building of the story, such as Job's inability to please anyone with his magic tricks, and Tobias and Lindsay's search for jobs and a fresh start, George Michael's newfound crush on his cousin maybe after she kissed him, and similarly Buster's Eatable-like obsession with Lucille. With all of these disruptions in the equilibrium of what at first looked to be a seemingly normal family came total disruption and dysfunction. What we do see at the end of the episode is the interweaving of all the storylines when the entire family, bar George, who was in prison, play a game of Monopoly. It is emphasized through the episode that putting family first is the most important thing for the Bluths. This can be read as a focus that the Fox Broadcasting Company wanted to push in Arrested Development, the conservative American family values that are important for the viewers to see, that when a family gets separated, there is always a way of gaining a stronger bond. There are many different narrative strategies that television shows use to build up the narrative of the stories. Arrested Development in particular utilizes several narrative concepts in the diegetic and non-diegetic realm to advance the character-driven stories. Nick Lacey describes the importance of the diegesis. Within conventional narrative, everything that happens within the world created by the narrative, the diegesis, contributes in some way to the development of the narrative. apologetic narrator, which Kozlov describes as the anonymous narrator, that come from another realm, are built into the narrative to give assistance to the storytelling. Flashbacks and flash forwards, known as analepsis and prolepsis, also help to advance the stories more quickly and succinctly when time is limited for the makers of the show to get a point across. Arrested Development adapts these concepts into its narrative to move forward the narrative much quicker than it would be if the characters did all the work. Because Arrested Development removes the use of a laugh track, the narrative is less broken up and can progress much quicker without the actors needing to pause after each joke or punchline. This means that the creators of the show could fit a large amount of narrative storytelling into a short amount of time. The use of an omniscient narrator who is a godlike observer, knows everything there is to know about the Bluth characters, how they feel and what they actually mean when they say something. He is used in the pilot episode to effectively introduce all of the core characters, erasing the need for the characters to spend any of their own time to tell the viewers who they are. The narrator also ties together important plot points that the audience need help with in understanding, such as when Michael is in an interview while looking for a new job, the narrator explains Michael was able to secure a job with a rival housing company almost immediately. This helped the viewer to know that Michael had moved on from the Bluth company without him ever actually saying it. The episode also incorporates the use of an analepsis, where it flashes back to a prior date. During the introductory stages of the episode, the narrator explains how George Bluth constructed the frozen banana stand back in 1953, while it shows a black and white snapshot of it then contrasted with the present day. Again, this helps with the fast-paced narrative flow that Arrested Development is characterized for, to be able to quickly set up an important plot point that lasts for the entire series. Another example is when Tobias administers CPR to a man who was not having a heart attack but instead sleeping. The scene cuts to a pool security camera footage showing the event, and also a newspaper article stating he broke the man's sternum. This helped to introduce to the viewers the often misinformed nature of Tobias Funke. A television series functions from many narratological concepts taken into account when presenting a television show. Arrested Development was characterized by its untraditional methods of delivering a show that was able to be smart and comical at the same time. The show was in a league of its own, combining concepts found in all types of television programming, and applied them to its own, while able to call itself a sitcom series that are becoming increasingly popular. The dysfunctional Bluth family, like any other sitcom family, combined both outrageous conflict and perfect harmony to deliver a show that's typically viewed as a series narrative, yet able to add dimensions of voiceover narration, analepsis and prolepsis to advance the storytelling of the narrative. Multiple storylines enable for a large amount of action to take place in the space of half an hour, where maximum usage of time is utilized to create a fast-paced